Welcome to the many interpretations of Einiosaurus. Einiosaurus is a ceratopsian that lived in the late Cretaceous of what is now North America, and they are a very cool ceratopsian. That says a lot because ceratopsians are just already amazing dinosaurs in general. But one thing that makes Einiosaurus so cool and really kind of unique is the fact that it has a very interesting nasal horn. A lot of the time, centrosaurine ceratopsians have a nasal horn that is either sticking straight up or kind of curved backwards a little bit. Like just look at animals like Centrosaurus or Styracosaurus. But Einiosaurus is unique in the fact that its nasal horn curves forward, which is why I love Einiosaurus, and one of the reasons why I'm very excited to get into this video. So without further ado, let's get into the video. We will start off with Dinosaur Planet, and we're starting off pretty strong because I really like this design. Now, first of all, the whole build is very consistent with how ceratopsian dinosaurs look. Like the body proportions seem pretty good, and it has a relatively short tail, which is something that ceratopsians did in fact have. The head also looks pretty spot on, complete with the sort of spikes that it had at the top of its frill, the frill in general seemingly having the correct shape, and of course the nasal horn that curves forward. It was also mentioned in this documentary that it's likely that Einiosaurus mostly used its nasal horn for display purposes, because it likely wasn't too effective being curved forward and kind of downwards a little bit. So that also shows that it's likely that ceratopsian dinosaurs in general might have prioritized using their head ornamentation for display purposes as opposed to combat. That's not to say they never used them for combat. Of course, many structures in nature have multiple purposes, but that just shows that they likely evolved these structures mainly for display, which is just very cool. It's very cool. I also really like the colors. And yeah, no, this is a great start to the list, like a very solid start in general. Also, they are portrayed living with Daspletosaurus and Maiasaura, which are two dinosaurs that they did indeed live with. After that is Dinosaur King, and the trend continues. This is another solid design. It doesn't even seem as shrink wrapped as other designs from Dinosaur King. The coloration looks really cool. I always love seeing blues like that. It almost kind of seems like they have feature scales, which are very large scales that are randomly placed throughout the body. It's something that Triceratops had, and so there's a possibility that other ceratopsians had it too. While they're not really randomly distributed across the body and they're more so in rows right here, it's still cool that it seems like they're present. And again, the head looks really good. The frill looks spot on. Those spikes at the top of its frill are spot on, and the nasal horn is also spot on. It also does seem like it's a little bit oversized here, kind of towering over the human right next to it. Einiosaurus was not a small dinosaur by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely wasn't this big. You'd be looking at an animal that weighed around 1.3 tons. So again, definitely not a small dinosaur, but certainly not reaching like Triceratops sizes. But again, that is another solid entry to the list. After that, we do have Dinosaur Train. And yeah, no, again, another solid entry. Of course, it is a little bit stylized given the fact that this is predominantly a children's show, but they still capture everything that you would likely expect from an Einiosaurus portrayal. The epiccipitals at the top of the frill, otherwise known as those spikes, and the nasal horn are both present here. The feet are, of course, not too terribly accurate. Einiosaurus, much like other ceratopsians, would have had really strange looking feet in the fact that they had like 3 main toes towards the front of the foot and 2 vestigial toes that were hanging off the back. Those were both on their front limbs, and their back limbs would have had 4 main toes. Because ceratopsians are just very interesting. It also does seem like they don't have much of a jugal, which is basically like that cheekbone, which is something that is really emphasized in ceratopsian dinosaurs. And it doesn't seem to be too present right here, but that's kind of a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. I like their design regardless. I think that they captured Einiosaurus pretty well, and we're just continuing the trend of very good looking Einiosaurus portrayals. And they also come in a wide array of different colors, which is also just really fun. It's also worth mentioning that so far we have seen 2 Einiosaurus in a herd. That is certainly a possibility. It is suspected that Centrosaurines, which is the specific group of ceratopsians that Einiosaurus belongs to, did travel in herds. There's been quite a few bone beds of centrosaurines all buried together, like huge numbers of them that were likely overtaken by flash flooding or something similar to that. There's an example of centrosaurs being found like this, there's an example of pachyrhinosaurs being found like this, and there is an example of Einiosaurs being found like this. So, yeah, it certainly is possible that Einiosaurus and other centrosaurine ceratopsians traveled in herds. I mean, it does happen a lot in nature today for like larger herbivorous animals. It makes sense for them to have huge groups like that. So far, it's really cool to see that sort of interpreted here. After that, we have I'm a Dinosaur. We have, of course, this 2D animated, very stylized Einiosaurus that still does capture most of the things that make Einiosaurus unique. Those mainly just being the nasal horn and the epiccipitals at the top of the frill. It's a good design. The coloration is fairly simple, but yeah, no, I quite like it. As far as the Jurassic franchise goes, we haven't seen any Einiosaurus in the movies or in the shows. But we have seen Einiosaurus in concept art. Now, according to the Jurassic Park wiki, apparently Colin Trevorrow did state that they had no plans to have Einiosaurus in the movie, and this is simply just an appearance in the concept art, which is a little bit sad. It would have been really cool to see Einiosaurus, but after what they did with the Sinoceratops, maybe it was for the better. I know that the Sinoceratops was meant to be a Pachyrhinosaurus initially, but that really doesn't make it any better. Anyway, the concept art that we see is simply just a silhouette. This is obviously the scene where Mount Sibo is erupting and there's a huge stampede of dinosaurs. And you just see some Einiosaurs over there. In the concept art, it is a very accurate design. The fact that you can very easily tell that it's Einiosaurus certainly does speak a lot for its quality. Again, there was no plans to have it in the movie, but it's certainly really interesting to see it here. As far as video games go, Einiosaurus has quite a few depictions. First, in Jurassic World, the game, we have this happy looking fella right here with a frill that is a little bit too wide and a little bit too long and just too big in general, but it does have the proper epiccipitals at the top of the frill and the nasal horn. The tail might be a little bit too thin and too long as well, and it does sport elephant feet. As I mentioned before, ceratopsians did not have elephant feet, so that is of course not correct. But it does have the feature scales, which is cool. You can really see them here, those sort of pebbly-like scales just all across the body, which is really cool. Obviously, when you level this guy up, it becomes way more vibrant, which is, yeah, I don't know, it's just pretty interesting. Next up is Jurassic World Alive, and it took some of the same design routes that Jurassic World the game did, mostly in the frill. The frill is just really wide, really huge, not really too accurate to the real life animal, but I really like the colors in the frill. It really kind of emphasizes the fact that the frill was likely mostly used for display, especially in dinosaurs like Einiosaurus, because most ceratopsians actually have these holes in their frill called fenestra. That would have made the frill pretty fragile, essentially, easy to break if they were bitten into. So that means it seems likely that they were not used for defense, like they weren't prioritized for defense, and rather were likely some type of signal, maybe for other Einiosaurs, or maybe to just make yourself look bigger. So I like seeing bright colors in the frill like this, and they kind of got some eyes going, which is a very common thing to do for ceratopsian frills. Next up is Jurassic World Primal Ops. Yeah, I don't mind this one. Like, the frill is not nearly as large. It actually seems a little bit better. It does have the structures on top of the frill, though it seems like they're kind of a little bit more off to the side as opposed to being closer to the top of the frill. But the nasal horn does look really good, and the feet are a bit closer to an actual ceratopsian's feet, although it doesn't seem like it has vestigial toes towards the back of the feet. That goes for the front feet only, really. And I like the mixture of the colors of orange and sort of ashy gray. It looks cool. It's a cool little design. It would have been cool to see a little bit more of it. Continuing the trend of video games, we'll take a look at Dino Hunter Deadly Shores. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's kind of like a boring coloration, all things considered, but the skull looks pretty good. The frill looks good. The spikes on top of the frill and the nasal horn. It does look like an Einiosaurus, and a lot of times if I can tell what it's meant to be, then it's a pretty decent design. After that is Fossil Fighters. Obviously, like I've said time and time again in this series, Fossil Fighters is a stylized game, so clearly we won't be expecting accuracy from this. I quite like this little model though. It's very robust overall and very rounded, but it does have the traits that we've talked about time and time again. Nasal horn, epiccipitals at the top of the frill. Very good. There's also Dinosaur Park Primeval Zoo. We get some really cool looking green Einiosaurs right here that have all of the structures, all of the bells and whistles that we've been talking about, and it has a little bit of some bright red in the frill, which is just really cool. Next up is Battle of Giants Dinosaur Strike. This Einiosaurus it looks like it's ready to fight in a Wii game, which is, I think, what kind of game this is. It's almost like the Star Wars, the Clone Wars Wii game, where you would fight each other. Pretty sure that's what this kind of I'm pretty sure that's what this is. I love the green mixed in with the yellow. It looks really cool. It's got the nasal horn. It's got the occipitals. And it actually does have the jugal bone that I mentioned earlier, but haven't mentioned since. Yeah, it's that structure right there. It's got more of like some elephant feet, and it's a bit more bulky, but again, it's mostly looks like a stylized game. And then next up, we have Path of Titans, where we have Styracosaurus.
What? That didn't make any sense. I thought we were looking at Einiosaurus, not Styracosaurus.
Oh, right you are. We are indeed looking at Einiosaurus. Now, obviously, Styracosaurus in the past did get a TLC where it got different models, as you can see right here. Different models that are drastically different from, like, the base Styracosaurus albertensis. One of those models is Procurvicornis, which, of course, is the species that is assigned to Einiosaurus. And as you can see, the model changes to actually look like Einiosaurus. So basically, you get Einiosaurus. You know, it's the base creature is called Styracosaurus, but in all essence, it's basically Einiosaurus, which is one of my favorite things that they did. I love when they do stuff like that. The developers of Path of Titans are usually the goats. You know how it goes. Anyway, the frill shape matches up, the spikes appear match up, and it has the curved horn. It's very beautiful. It's very, very beautiful. Let's check it out in game. And here it is. Like I said, it is a very nice model that looks basically just like Einiosaurus, you know, like because both Styracosaurus and Einiosaurus are centrosaurines, it makes sense that you would be able to include a model that looks like Einiosaurus on like a base model that is actually Styracosaurus. Like, the occipital placement seems to be pretty correct, and the nasal horn looks overall very solid. You know, it's a very nice design, and you even have all those feature scales all over the back of the animal's body. There's really not much else I can say. Like, I love it. I made a whole video simply just playing as Einiosaurus when the Styracosaurus TLC was released because I thought it was such a cool inclusion. I love Einiosaurus, you know. It just looks great. Look at this. Look at that. Again, there's really nothing else I can say. I love it. I love this creature with all of my heart. We also might as well take a look at some of the figures that have released. First, looking at Jurassic World's Mattel figure. It's got some really nice blues. I like the contrast between like the darkness of the head and the rest of the body that's a little bit more light, and that little splotch of color in its frill. The nasal horn is certainly interesting. Instead of continually curving downwards, it kind of curves back up a little bit, which, I mean, that might have been possible. Obviously, the nasal horns would have been layered in keratin, much like how horns today are layered in keratin. So it is certainly a possibility that they would take some really interesting shapes. I don't mind this figure. It looks pretty darn cool. There's also the Collecta figure. I like this one too. I like the colors. The colors are very, like, they feel very classic dinosaur, if that makes sense. The skull looks good, and they also have some small, like, either feathers or quill-like structures towards the back of it, which is something that we don't really have evidence for in dinosaurs like Einiosaurus, but a smaller ceratopsian known as Psittacosaurus has been found with these little bristles at the end of the tail, or towards the base of the tail, really. Obviously, there's still a possibility that other ceratopsians had it. We just don't really have evidence for it right now. Next up is Safari LTD, and this one looks cool. I like it. I like the body proportions. I like the fact that it has the feature scales all over the body. The frill looks really good. I love the way that the nasal horn looks. It seems like it's a little bit of an older safari figure, I believe around 2017. And, you know, for that time, I think it looks still pretty good. You know, the feet seem correct as well. So yeah, I like it. Now, last but certainly not least, the last two figures we can take a look at come from Creative Beast Studios, Beasts of the Mesozoic, and Halongood. These figures are really nice. They're both, well, all three of them really, are extremely accurate. Like the Creative Beast Studios one just has really nice patterns, really nice coloration. I love the colors in the frill, and the head in general is just extremely accurate to the real life animal. You know, you got the nasal horn, the frill shape looks pretty good, and you also do have those structures up there. The same goes for the Halongood ones. This is a really cool little figure stand that came with it. You're able to move them around and have them in all kinds of different positions if you so choose. Of course, you got like two Einiosaurs that are kind of like, you know, they're kind of just going against each other. Earlier, I did mention that those nasal horns were likely mostly used for display, which is still true. But that doesn't really discount the idea that these guys would get into some shoving matches every once in a while, which is kind of what these figures represent. You can kind of set them up in a way that makes it so that they're not really like pushing into their nasal horns and are rather just pushing into each other's heads, which is just really cool. You know, the figures in general are very accurate. The feet look really good. The head shape looks amazing. The body proportions are really good, and they have a reduced tail, much like ceratopsians did in life. So both Creative Beast Studios and Hull on Good did a fantastic job at portraying Einiosaurus in figure form. A Go Diego Go video game did have Einiosaurus as well, with some like really pink colors. Some folks in my Discord server did mention that Go Dino Explorers also had some Einiosaurs and Dino Master right here, as well as Dinosaur Planet. A lot of these projects, of course, do seem like they are children's projects, which I think is interesting because as far as I could tell from doing this video, Einiosaurus seems to show up in a lot of like made for children educational things. You know, which that's interesting that Einiosaurus is so frequent in that. Like, what is it about Einiosaurus that makes it a prime dinosaur to teach kids about dinosaurs in general? I don't know, but it's a fitting dinosaur because it's such a cool dinosaur that certainly does deserve some more recognition. And yeah, there's actually quite a few depictions of Einiosaurus, probably way more than most of us expected, which I'm happy about. You know, hopefully we can see more in the future. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. Before we end it, I want to thank my patrons and my channel members. You guys are truly amazing, and you have been helping out a lot lately. So thank you all so much for becoming members and patrons. If you yourself want to become a patron or a channel member, the links for those are down below. You gain access to a lot of different really cool perks. So yeah, that's available if you're interested. But that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day.